All right, everyone. Welcome back. If you can settle in, we'll start gathering our panel up here. Thank you. I can tell a really engaging discussion about negotiating electronic resource licenses. um, really great to hear the ideas, hear the feedback, and your thoughts about how we develop and mature that at CRL. A lot of things I heard there match up with things Lynette and I have talked about, and it's great to feel like we have some momentum and direction. We are into our third discussion session of the meeting. We've tried to cover, what we think of the big three of collections and licensing and collective action here. So I'm really pleased to introduce this forum, Stacks and Strategy, a forum on collections and access, led by our very own director, Kevin Merriman. Kevin, if you want to introduce your group and kick us off.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you all for coming, and I'm grateful you were able to stay past the business meeting to contribute to this important strategic moment in CRL. I generally prefer to speak from notes and somewhat extemporaneously, but today I will be reading because I'm quite tired. I literally used to think, until today, the framing of what keeps you up at night was merely a metaphor, and that changed at about 3:50 a.m. this morning. I was originally very nonplussed about this brief introduction because strategic planning is a familiar process to probably most everyone here. I just would discuss what we're doing, briefly review our resources, and then we would discuss amongst ourselves how to go forward in light of our values and needs that we've really dug into over the past day. What kept me awake last night were value-related metrics swirling in my mind, such as ROI and cost per use. I know that the member representatives here recognize that CRL is a consortium, and I know that conversations over the past day and so have highlighted the need for better tools to tell our stories, and administrators and possibly even some staff with less familiarity of our work are evaluating the value of their various memberships, and they're comparing us to other organizations. I know, and you know, we are not like other organizations, and that's very easy to say and feel proud of, but you have to communicate that. So I would like to underline the subject of value as a multifaceted measure, which we have all done in other strategic sessions during this meeting. Today, we will be doing so in the context of collections. We will work on communicating our value, and this is our time to dig into the collection specifically and how they add value. You just considered digital collections in the context of licensing. I assure you that we continue to proactively build our print collections as well. This slide represents about $300,000 of ongoing subscriptions through the Library of Congress cooperative acquisitions programs and through vendor aggregators. And you can see from the areas represented that we do have a fairly broad diversity, but not a lot of depth. So there's representation from most every area of the globe, but it's not thoughtful or balanced. I don't know what's gone into the history of this, and I certainly do not mean to be critical of my predecessors, but I think there's a significant opportunity here for us to review this portfolio and possibly rebalance it, especially in light of situations that are happening at our own institutions and in light of our recommitment to print collections. There was a strategic decision made previously, maybe a decade ago, to move away from print and cancel some subscriptions that were handled centrally so that all of the members would not need to keep their own individual copies. That is history, but where we are now, I wonder if that might be an opportunity for us to going forward, because many things are still available only in print, especially if you're talking about a global collection. So to the original model of strategic planning and what we're doing today, We have these funds committed now. We can continue to keep these subscriptions in this portfolio, draw it down, or add to it. We also, in the budget, you'll know, have $400,000 allocated to the new global collections committees available, and how those get spent down are also subject to strategic development going forward. As we consider the questions in front of us on your sheets of paper of what to stop, what to continue, and what to start, please consider some conceptual framing beyond just conventional purchases, licensing, and other membership models, because our collections are meant to transcend the immediate membership. Here's a list of some ideas to help you think creatively. We can digitize some of the print content we have to open up access. We can digitize content that other libraries have. We can digitize content in or out of copyright and sort through all the logistics of that. We can host digital content on our own servers. We can host print content on our own shelves, or we can lease out space, either virtual or physical. We have in the past worked with commercial partners who've digitized contents that come free to our members, and then they recapture their investment by selling it to non-members. We digitize on demand. This is the current backbone that we provide efficiency, because proactive digitization of print content is still costly, which is why people often enter into deals with vendors or even with Google, for example. But we find that it's efficient for us to gather print material, make it discoverable, and then digitize at the point of need, which is another model which is possibly less favored amongst an individual research institution, but at our scale might still provide a better return on the investment in that context. But at CRL, access is inseparable from the collections because of some of the intricate linkings, such as digitize on demand. Purchase by request is another area that is responsive to user needs at the point of need, wherein we purchase non-US dissertations from the university that's publishing it at the point of request from our user researchers. And if they don't know about that program, they might not realize that that's available to them in an established workflow at CRL. Another opportunity tied to collecting, which is also invoked by the recently revised collection development policy, which are principles and philosophy in keeping with contemporary collection work, is to continue the strengths that we've already built over the past 75 years, such as our strength in global and ethnic newsprint. As I mentioned before, print is still significant in many parts of the world, including some areas of the United States and Canada, I assume. The question of CRL's value lies not only in extending the capacity of doing more of what you can already do at your organization, but doing work that can only be done collaboratively. If the collection that's been built over the past 75 years meets current research needs and have good discoverability, then we would have higher circulation. But may I suggest that as you're doing your strategic planning today, going forward, that you put some thought towards collection and preservation of what researchers might need 75 years from now and what their use statistics are going to look like. We tend to focus, no, we don't tend, we do. We focus on the long tail and nuance and preserving stories that will not rise to the top of use metrics unless that's where you want to go. I believe that the value of CRL lies within our values, the theme of this year's conference, and the benefits to our current members now, but the ROI of CRL lies in the future. Thank you. I will now turn to two member representatives who will talk about collections and their experience as member libraries, starting first with Daniel Dollar, AUL for Collections at Yale University.
All right. Oh. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, all right, there we go. Thank you for the opportunity to sort of help provide some provocation as we get into this round of conversation. When I was first introduced to CRL a long time ago, I was told that it provided access to scholarly significant materials that were low use. And I think that's a pretty reductive description of CRL, but for sake of provocation, I'm just going to roll with that right now. And I just have a series of questions and to sort of frame this. So how do we determine as a community what resources are of scholarly significance and that CRL should acquire them? I think knowing that the collection development policy has been recently redone is a wonderful first step. How are these collections a service to the membership, the communities we serve, and the broader scholarly community? And can that be clearly explained? Again, starting points, collection development policies and procedures, starting to build that out and review it. How do we assess these collections? And we actually were in a conversation at our table about how do we assess collections that are open access. So, yep, hopefully I didn't take anything away from you there. And then this concept of low use, which, I mean, for us collection folks is generally shorthand for what we're going to cut first when the budgets get cut. So, can we reframe low use? And I think you were doing that in your remarks. But how do we increase usage? Because that is something we do have to look at. Improved integration of metadata into our discovery systems, rapid document delivery, digitization, course integration, use of AI tools and agents. Okay, AI. And then, thinking about our investments in CRL over 75 years, it's allowed us to consolidate efforts through CRL. And, consolidation can be a very powerful way to achieve cost avoidance. And so how can we tell that narrative more effectively with evidence? What would a CRL impact report look like, for example? What is the global impact of CRL's collections and services? And are there ways we can address global inequities in scholarly communication through the collective work of CRL? What is the marketing and communication plans for CRL collections, both to promote the collections to scholarly communities, but also to communicate what CRL is doing at our libraries? And I think about those two very different audiences, and I can just only speak for being at an R1 institution, but our libraries contain different constituencies. And this has come up again, even in the conversations around the formation of the GCCs. You've got different constituencies within our institutions, and how are we communicating to those different constituencies, and then while at the same time maintaining a unified message? And then finally, the CRL facility is an important and valuable resource for tangible collections. So how do we best leverage that asset to advance CRL's mission and values? And with that, I'll stop.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Laurie Taylor. I'm the AUL for Collections at the University of Connecticut, which we call UConn, not to be confused with the other UConn, just as I say that. So it's really nice to see how our conversations throughout the different discussions have lined up, and also with the panel today. My perspective comes from my role at UConn as an AUL for Collections and as an area studies person. So as an area studies person, CRL has always been such a critically important archive and hub for the community. So we know CRL is only 76 years old, which is both very old and also not as old as what it does. So we see the Farmington Plan coming out of the World Wars and seeing, hey, we're the United States. We want to make sure that we have access to resources from around the world, even during times of war. So how do we do this? So we divide the world into areas, and then we make sure different libraries are set up to do the collecting work. So we have the National Resource Centers, which emerge, the Center for Latin American Studies, Center for African Studies, that you see on different campuses. Some of those are actively being defunded, so that's, of course, another more critical concern. But CRL has always been the one that brings together, through the AMPs, the GRNs, now the global, now the GCC, that brings all of those communities of practice together to really speak to international studies. And we have to have this community and connection for the work that we do, and also for the scholarly questions. What does rubber mean? How about global commodities? What about tobacco? What about sugar? These are the research questions that our scholars are asking, and they cut across areas as well as going deep into them. So the way that we have to answer this is through a function, through a wonderful archive and a community, which CRL does. So we have all that tremendous value. And then if I put my UConn hat on, we've already unbundled all of the big deals. We focus very vigorously on cost per use. We're always looking for just-in-time access rather than just-in-case. Those metrics are great when we're talking about databases and articles. Those don't really translate to what CRL does and how the value proposition is set up. So my question, just one for everyone, I'd like to know what are the right measures for evaluating CRL. Maybe it's the impact report. Maybe it's talking about the constellation that Christian mentioned earlier. But I'd like us to talk about that for how we communicate it within our institutions, how we understand it for ourselves, and then how we use that for prioritizing future work. So as we think about these questions, I'd like us to think capaciously about complex systems. And I'm always reminded of the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands Antilles when speaking about Aruba's potential to go independent. He said 6 minus 1 is 0. So if you lose one of the core members, the entire thing can dissolve. What's the core for CRL? What is that core value proposition, and how do we communicate it? So I'm really interested in seeing all of our discussions for how we discuss how we better celebrate CRL and how we better support it. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you, and it is really nice how all of these presentations have lined up in light of the conversations we've had over the past couple of days. So the format is the same as what we've been doing. Please discuss amongst yourselves at your tables. There are sheets with lines for what we should start, stop, and continue, after which we will come together, report out, and then gather up the sheets later. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for what sounds like another good discussion, and my eavesdropping has, as usual, been fascinating for me. We're going to take some time now to report out. We've moved the mics to the edge of the room so you don't have to be standing with your backs to each other. If someone would like to be first up, you can pick your platform.
This is tippy toe here. I think you can still hear me. We had a great conversation at our table, and a variety of thoughts. We couldn't come up with anything that CRL should give up in this area. It probably sounds familiar, typical. We thought of things that could do more, or not advertise more, but make more apparent, and maybe approach in a even more robust way than we're doing now. Just some various takeaways from discussions. Our NYPL colleague, Jason, you might be familiar with his description of the many, many bundles of newspapers in foreign languages, at-risk materials. And this led to a conversation about sort of maybe having strategic meetings with other CRL colleagues, or CRL initiating strategic meetings basically around what are you collecting in this area? Is there duplication? And are there other players that can work together? Jason mentioned RECAP, for example, and he's not sure if RECAP or other colleagues have similar bundles and bundles and bundles of newspapers that are risk and will be crumbling very soon. That does lead to another question that was raised at the table, and that Jake confirmed is being done, but perhaps can be even done even in a broader way or more focused way. Does CRL reach out to members saying, hey, do you have something unique that we need to save? And according to Jake, well, as we know, CRL has record analysis, has analysts, has these capabilities, but CRL could help in bringing this to even more members or making it more apparent or more robust. We tried to skirt around ROI, but for many of us, we live daily having to prove our ROI at libraries. But if I may use that term, ROI can be, as one of the members of our table said, can be the long tail. It's if it connects to your institutional mission in terms of it may not be of use immediately, but if it ties to your mission, it may be materials in your area that in your mission that will be used in the long run. Lastly, I did want to bring up a very interesting note from our colleague who's at, I think it's Chicago State, who was talking about beyond international collections, looking locally or nationally to those scholarly those resources such as at-risk newspapers from ethnic communities, from local communities that are being lost, endangered neighborhood communities. Does CRL have a place in collecting even more robustly these at-risk newspapers? Coming from Pittsburgh, for example, and I think the University of Pittsburgh might do this, so I don't know where Marta is, but the Pittsburgh Courier, for example, is a traditional Black African-American newspaper that is being preserved, I believe, but many, many other similar newspapers are not. So where's CRL's place in that? I think that's it.
Up at the front, we had a really active and engaged conversation about Polish literature. So we have the solution for Polish literature, and we'd like to offer that. No, it started with talking about like sort of outsourcing subject librarianship to CRL. But to come back to collecting, we say area studies, and people mean different things by area studies, and oftentimes it's like those are areas where there isn't like a commercial market that supplies these things to North America. That might be one definition of area studies. But when it comes to like books from Poland and books from the Ukraine and books from, I mean, there's hundreds, scores of languages, books from Bolivia, you know, just keep going on and on down the list. The ability of all of our institutions in this room to purchase materials in those areas has been slowly eroded. It's being severely attenuated. It's probably about to go through another purge of ability to do that. And so I question why we at our institution are buying books in certain languages for what will be not just low use, but like epochal use, meaning like once in an epoch, the book might actually go to a user at my institution. So why are we not thinking, CRL has what I would call really unique and really esoteric collections, but why not think of it as a place to like centralize what we have left of buying these current materials in Polish, from Bolivia, you name it, and so forth, do it at CRL. The only way to do that, though, that would make sense from an efficiency standpoint and from a service delivery standpoint, would be if we had the tolerance to digitize them, whether they came digital or not, and lend them through controlled digital lending, you know, to share that, and do it in a way that wouldn't take us down the path of IA, making it large and sort of grandstanding and broad and sort of at the poking at like English language ebook offerings. That's a bad thing to do, obviously, it gets you sued. But you know, we were talking about like what is the odds of a Polish publisher suing CRL because they've damaged their market for Polish books in North America? And let's be realistic. It's probably not going to happen. So there might be some really scaled opportunities there that would allow a lot of us to do what we've either had to stop doing because it's already gone from the budget, or we're about to have to stop doing, so that these books are at least available with a couple of clicks to our users, and you know, they're just not gone from the world. So that's what we talked about, Polish literature.
All right, I'll scoot ahead here. So our table had a really great discussion, and I think one of the first things that came up, of course, is the need for impact reports. individualized impact reports. So I think like there's this great, the prospectus has all this great bullet point information that I think you all gotten electronically about all the things that CRL does, which is very helpful, but then some individualized institutional impact reporting, especially if we can kind of veer towards the qualitative and getting pull quotes from researchers who use the materials. I think it's much more important for us and library leaders and decision makers to have that sort of story on hand and being able to tell the story of the existential utility of CRL would be really helpful to us. I think one of the other, there were a lot of opportunities, sort of thinking about, this has come up in other sort of ways, but pulling together maybe not an official directory, but at least some sort of awareness of and coordination of the distinctive collections that we have, the members have, and if we can point maybe not to CRL, but CRL can help us point to other institutions that could also be very helpful. And then I think there's a lot of opportunities within that, or parallel to that, with the CRL catalog, because some of us have put some of the things from CRL catalog into our own catalog, but thinking about how we create that better awareness of what's available and boosting the discovery. And to that point, we talked about maybe having CRL partner with us on professional development opportunities, like maybe having some training for our frontline staff, liaisons, area studies librarians, whatever, so that they're aware of the things that are available from CRL. So it's top of mind, because I think that a number of us are concerned about that, like just not being available, or running that second or third search in a different catalog. And then I think I said CRLs should stop underselling themselves, but other folks said CRLs should stop trying to be everything to everyone. There needs to be some strategic choices made, I think is a fair point. And in terms of that provocation we were given, and like the 6 - 1 = 0 sort of provocation, I think CRL, there's nothing we can really think of they should stop doing, but they absolutely can't stop doing the sort of area studies work. There's not really other spaces in which this work is happening. So that's a key piece. I'm sorry if I missed things. I'll go.
I think there are a lot of themes here, so I won't try to be redundant, but I think overall, this return on investment, whether that's cost per use or a broader support of the infrastructure and the future researcher, is really important. But looking at that cost per use feels concerning at this moment, given there's still so much appetite for understanding what it is that people have and whether or not they're using it. So this outreach piece, this instruction piece, is critical to get to that point where we feel good about our return on investment, whether you're looking broadly or specifically to your institution. And that there was a lot of ideas about making, I guess the thing would be making that easier for CRL staff now and in the future. I mean, that could be a recorded webinar, that could be towards liaisons, towards ILL, towards deans and directors, so we all can think about that and do that on an annual basis. It's not a one and done. So the question of what can we stop doing, I think the feeling was we don't know enough about what they're doing to tell them what to stop, which I think is really true. So we're really at this kind of critical moment, a little bit of a chicken and an egg moment in that way. But low-cost materials are still really important. I'm figuring that out. That's still an investment, and there is a return on that, even if it's a long game. Area studies, especially as we lose our ability to do that locally, this is so important. There's concern about the future of the Library of Congress and our reliance on them for collections, and want to hear about that if there's a strategy that comes forward. And I think, and then in just some really practical things, how do you get your records in? How do you load your records in your discovery environment? And again, make more transparency about the collection. So thank you.
Thanks. So I think without repeating everyone else said, we also talked about various things already said. In my personal experience, CRL was always the library's library. So because of that, CRL suffers the same problem we as a library are suffering. People do not know what we have, what we offer. So that is the important thing that CRL need to do. So in this way, we can also create the demands. If we can tell what we have in CRL, people may find more use for that. And also, before I forget, when we talked about ROI, so Kevin earlier mentioned about our ROI might be finding in the future. So what about if you can get the data of the materials currently being used when they were purchased in CRL? So that might tell another interesting stories. And also the materials that our patron can get from CRL is nowhere else to find. So the impact of that material you got from CRL is much bigger than 10,000 articles you can get from 10,000 other libraries. And at the end of our discussion, Liz said something really changed my mind way of seeing CRL. CRL is a branch library we all have. Just happen to know that no one knows that branch does exist. Paying just 0.52% of your budget, you have a huge branch library in every one of us libraries. So how to make it our own branch libraries, discovery, outreach, and everything, then we can find our values here. And also, as a library's library, there are a couple of other things we talked about is that the materials that individual library cannot purchase, the international government data set, or the born digital materials and preservation, all those things. So CRL is our library. I think that's the point. Thanks.
All right. So let's see. On start, I mean, I like the idea of the branch library and thinking about that. I mean, I think CRL is a sort of hub for shared print as well. And I think with thinking about shared print, you don't think about return on investment, except for perhaps money you don't have to spend. So it's, we thought about it more as our distinctive collections and special collections. We think about those very differently. We think deans probably think about those very differently and talk with provosts about them differently than our circulating collections. So, CRL is similar. Something for CRL to start that I've been thinking about for a long time is engaging with Title VI and figuring out how to sort of coordinate and look more at collaborative collection development, where we can enrich the national collection rather than duplicate it. And that might require work with the federal government. And John had mentioned, he had to leave, but he mentioned potentially working with ARL on that, since they actually have people who do talk to the federal government. But there's an awful lot of expertise that's built up around Title VI. There's a lot of money being spent on campuses, but there's no real good coordination. And I'm not talking about the money that comes in to be spent on library funds. Although, if we spent that in a smart way, where we divvied that out and said, you cover this area or whatever, I just really think there's potential there. So that's something I think CRL, it's right in your sort of wheelhouse. And it also might be a way to really continue to engage area study specialists and give them agency, which I think is critical at this point. Some other things, something that I just don't know about. Does CRL prospectively commit to retain everything that it acquires? So is that in Green Glass and other areas where people can see it and use that information? When we were thinking about, like Kevin showed, here's the stuff that we're acquiring. It's very important that both that's the right stuff, but that also, if it changes, people know as far as ongoing commitments as well. So that's critical. We talked also a little bit about sort of the focus, and the New York Public newspapers was still something that was on our minds as far as there's a warehouse someplace with all this stuff in it, and who's going to take care of it? And we kind of settled on the physical materials are really critical, and there is digitize-on-demand. There's the potential for leveraging 108 in the U.S. anyway for a CDL type thing in the future, but we got to have the stuff first. And so we said double down on that. I would say continue to rely on area studies specialists, and I love the idea that somebody brought up of bringing them more tightly into sort of decision-making. I mean, I think there is the expectation to try to do that. I think that's critical for leveraging that and keeping the connections. Did I miss anything else, you guys? No? Okay.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to everyone involved here. Thank you. Really rich ideas, great discussion. Please make sure to get your sheets to one of the CRL staff members so we can collect all that information. We are into lunch. We're back here at 1:30. I know some of you have to catch planes. Thank you for being here. We look forward to more. For those of you who are coming back, I promise to say something scary, something provocative, something audacious, to go off script at least 3 times, but to end on a very hopeful and optimistic note. So see you back here at 1:30 for our closing.